Hello guys, welcome back to Locals Update episode 5 or 6 now, I believe. Uh, yeah, so I did say that I didn't think it was going to be a Locals Update, but it turned out my Locals was on, so I was able to go, and uh, I'll get into the details of it now. So, the deck list I am going to show this week is actually going to be the Orcust Bestial deck list again, because I felt like I didn't show for the Sharks list. I didn't talk about it again because I didn't feel like there was much to talk about. It kind of had played the way I wanted it to, the way I explained it. Well, the Orcust list was very. It wasn't exactly how I was expecting things to go. It was good, it was fantastic, but it was very interesting. So, um, obviously, so for the games, I had one. I drew my first one against Centurion Resonator. Uh, yeah, and then second game, I lost to White Forest Azumina. Third game, I drew against Blue Eyes Tenpai. And my final game, I won against Pure Blue Eyes. So it was honestly a surprisingly good night. I didn't expect this deck to do as well as it had done. I feel like it could have done better, but I think it was more kind of just me not playing into the deck's strengths than it being a bad deck. So I'll get into the cards and explain kind of how everything ended up working out. So to begin, the one card starter of the deck is Mr. Girsu, the Orcust Mech Knight. So there is Girsu, and then there's also Armageddon Knight as your starters. The only real difference between these two is that he can be searched off reinforcements of the army. So you're technically playing 4 copies of him in your deck. But if you have Girsu and a Bestial, you can extend your combo a little more than just having like Armageddon Knight and a Bestial. So it is pretty good. These guys are fantastic. They give so much interesting play to the deck that just wouldn't be there otherwise. Girsu being able to turn himself into a tuner is so interesting and powerful for the deck, because there's times where you can summon Girsu, make him a tuner, and then use Girsu plus like a Bestial to go into your Bestial Dispatter. And then that didn't come up last night, but it is definitely something that's very powerful that you can do. So I have these guys. They're the one card starters. Whenever the new support comes out for Orcust, though, I am going to cut Armageddon Knight and play 3 Foolish Burial Goods instead. So the reason I'm going to do that is because there's a card that's going to come up later on, which is Orcust Crescendo. It basically allows you to banish it from the grave to add a Dark Machine monster. You could add to your hand one of your Dark Machine monsters as banisher in your deck. So you banish this. But so you go activate Foolish Burial Goods, send this to grave, banish it, add Girsu to hand, and then you can just normal summon Girsu, and then go full Orcust combo off Girsu. Which is very good off the new stuff, because it has so much more strong dark machines that you want to end on. Right now, you're kind of wanting to end on ASP Little Knight because that's really the only dark machine that's very beneficial to you. But yeah, that would be the only change of these guys whenever the new stuff comes out. And you can still play Armageddon Knight if you want. It's only because I feel Foolish Burial Goods will be a bit stronger than just the Armageddon Knight. Because it can also then be used as a board breaker and stuff like that. So next we have another card that is actually becoming a one card starter whenever the new Orcust support comes out. I'm sorry, I should say the new Orcust support is a Link 1 monster that can send a card from on summon, sends a card from hand to grave to add either a World Legacy monster or Orchestrated Babel. Typically, I want to add Orchestrated Babel, this card, which is really good. But and the other one is Enlil Girsu, the Orcust Mech Knight, I believe, who is a Link 4, who basically allows you to add back one of your banished dark machines to hand, and then you can choose if you want to shuffle that card back into the deck and snatch and take one of your opponent's monsters, which is really, really powerful. But anyway, so Orcust Harpour will become a one card combo whenever that comes out. But for right now, it is a 2 card combo as long as you have a way to summon a Bestial. So you can go Harpour and do all your stuff as long as you can make a as long as you can get out a Bestial, you can do all your Harpour stuff, so it's pretty good. So next up we have Foolish Burial and Reinforcements of the Army. Foolish Burial sends a monster from deck to grave. All of the Orcusts get their effects whenever they get sent from in the grave. An absolutely fantastic card for the deck. Probably don't need to explain why it's so good. And then Reinforcement of the Army is just an extra copy of Armageddon Knight. So yeah, it's just, it adds a warrior from deck to hand, and it'll usually just be Armageddon Knight, I believe, because that is the only warrior in this deck actually. So next I'll move on to the soft bricks that the deck plays. So by soft brick I mean they are cards that aren't bad to draw, and they don't technically ruin your combo if you do draw them, but you'd much rather not draw them. So because you can search them out. So the first is Orchestrated Babel. Probably the best to draw because it makes your Orcust monster effects in the grave quick effects. So suddenly the Bestial that your opponent has used that targets your Orcust Harpour just fizzles because you've quick effect banished. So this is probably the best one to draw. It's still not great though. You would prefer something else. Next we play Orcust Crescendo. So this is the Omni Negate. And also Engrave adds Orcust. Well, I say Orcust, a Dark Machine monster. A lot of the time it will be an Orcust monster, but I have considered actually playing it with the Max Metalmorph stuff, because the big guys who shuffle themselves in to set the trap are Dark Machines as well. So I have considered playing that in just to get maybe potentially an extra Omni Negate or an extra pop 2 that just is a bit more, just to get a bit more power onto the end board. And then the next two are the World Legacy Whirlwind, which is the honorary Orcust, and of course the Orcust Symbol Skeleton. These two cards are fantastic for follow up. This guy obviously special summons something from grave. This guy banishes and special something from banishment. Obviously, all of the banish themselves effects do lock them in you into darks for the rest of the turn, but realistically, dark is one of the best types in the game, so you don't really mind. And they're so interchangeable and fantastic. Now, this is the only soft brick you play at 2. So the reason you play this at 2 is it does actually come up in a grand game quite often, but also if you draw Nightmare, that does, it is a hard brick if you draw it. It does just kind of ruin your combo. You do because this is what you summon off Heartpour. So if you draw it, you either summon this off Heartpour, or you summon Girsu off Heartpour, and then Girsu sends this to grave. So if you are only playing one and you draw it, your combo is just dead. Like, there's nothing you can do. So that is why you play the 2. It does also come up in a grind game, sometimes, because sometimes it's hard just to focus on recycling specifically him, but you do kind of need to play 2 just for the safety sake, because it's just so bad if you do just draw him. So that is it for the Orcust engine. Quite nice and self-contained, and realistically you could cut down on it even more if you wanted to play it in another deck. But because, and the only reason I have it so large is because it's the main engine of my deck. I want it to be the main driving force, and that is why the only support for it I have is the Bestials, which genuinely synergize with it fantastically. The Bestial Rebellion is like a ridiculously strong card. It's a really good card, but because it's a light, you have to do your Bestial Rebellion stuff before you do your Orcust combo, which honestly sometimes isn't terrible, because you can Bestial Rebellion to add your Magnum up, say, and if they use any like light or dark, if they've used any light or dark monsters in, like, if you're going second and they've used any light or dark monsters, you can either break their board with a Bestial Druisworm, or get a Bestial Magnum to have better follow-up if you think you'll live that long. And he's just really, really good. Especially with the card that he sets being Branded Regained. This card is so good. It just makes the deck so much better because it shuffles back lights or darks when a light or dark gets banished. And all of the Orcust stuff banishes themselves for cost. Meaning that you're getting the advantage of the Orcust effect, and also getting the advantage of drawing a card potentially. So it's just an absolutely fantastic card. It would be brilliant if it literally just said, "Oh, if a light or dark gets banished, shuffle them back." But the fact that it also states that you can also target a Bestial in your graveyard and special summon it just makes this card like absolutely fantastic. And one of the best cards in the deck, honestly. Especially for the grind game, which you really want to get to in this with this deck. So next we have the Bestial lineup. So I am playing one Magnum up because he is limited to one copy per deck. One Bestial Druisworm, because he's limited. Well, because he's expensive. And then 3 Bestial Baldric because he's cheap. And realistically, I find that you probably only need to play 3 Bestials in your deck. And so that's, yeah, why, well, not 3. 5 bestial hand traps in your deck. Because this deck already has about 14 pieces of non-engine. So you've got 18 cards to interact with your opponent when you go second. So already you're pretty fine. But the Bestials also just being able to really meld with the engine just makes them the icing on the cake. So talking about that non-engine, I will get into it now. So Called by the Grave is a very good card, obviously. Banishes, targets something in the opponent's grave, targets a monster in the opponent's grave, banishes it, negates its effects. Great for going first against hand traps. Now, Dominus Impulse is a card I don't think I've really shown off because it's a very dependent on the deck hand trap. So basically, it's sort of the same as Imperm, where you can use it. It's a trap card that you can use from hand if your opponent controls a card. For this one, Imperm, you have to control no cards to use it from hand. So with Impulse, you can negate the effect that would special summon a monster. And if it's something that's on the field, if you have a trap in your grave, you can destroy a card. So this is a fantastic card for potentially just stopping your opponent from playing a lot of the time. Sometimes if they need one effect to go through that'll special summon a monster, you can just stop that. And there is a huge downside to it though, and that's why it is situational to decks, because if you use it from your hand, you can no longer use to activate the effects of light, earth, and wind monsters. And obviously, light's one of the best attributes in the game, but in this, you only play at most. You only play one light monster who is an engine piece, and that's the Bestial Rebellion. The rest are just hand traps. So you can use your hand traps appropriately to use up all your light hand traps, and then if you're desperate, Dominus Impulse, which is just fantastic. So next we have Triple Imperm, which is bog standard. Target a monster, negate its effects. If it's on field, negates the column. Triple Nibiru, mass removal by tributing everything on board and making summon himself, making a token. You can actually Impulse Nibiru as well because he would special himself. So Impulse is nice security against that. Finally, Fact Veiler. Well, sorry, not finally. Fact Veiler, Imperm but a monster. Great. And you can only use it during your opponent's turn. And finally, Ash Blossom and the Joyous Spring, because it's the best card in the game. So that is the main deck of 40 cards. Now to move on to the extra deck, and that's kind of where I feel the most interesting thing happened, because Galatea and playing 2 Galatea, 2 Dingirsu, pretty standard, and 1 Longirsu. That's very standard for Orcust extra deck monsters, because you want 2 Galatea to make during your next turn. You want 2 Dingirsu in case one gets banished, and it's all just kind of, yeah, you play this stuff because that's kind of what is done in Orcust. And Longirsu is a decent guy. He has a decent effect and is good at recycling stuff. But now the best card, without a doubt, I found was IP Masquerena, because the problem with the Orcust Link monsters is they need specifically effect monsters plus an Orcust. IP Masquerena just needs 2 non-link monsters. So if you normal summon Girsu and its effect Ascend gets ashed, you can just summon out the tokens and make an IP. And because you're playing Bestials, you'll probably have a way to get another monster on board. So while it isn't as potent as a lot of plays of other decks, IP Pass with a Bestial in hand is still really, really strong. Because it's just so much interaction without really your opponent realizing it. And then obviously the next card is the card you sometimes go into, which I found I only went into it sometimes last night, was the SP Little Knight. It's obviously great to go into. It's one of the best cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Again. Banishes something on summon if it was made using a link monster. IP Masquerena. And then also targets two things. With one having to be on your field and banishes both until the end phase, which also works great with Branded Regained because you can shuffle back either if you banish a light or dark, you can shuffle back your opponent's light or dark to get a draw, and then they will not get it back because it's shuffled away. Next is the Beat Cop, which is purely there to go into the Abayaku, who was really, really strong last night. This is such a good card. I really wanted to go into her every single time because she gives a discard for cost, which is fantastic for unbricking hands, where you've drawn an Orcust piece and you have to think of some way to get around the fact that you've drawn an Orcust piece that needs to be engraved. So this being able to banish itself and revive as well, allowing you to make this indestructible until it's back, and bring back IP, absolutely fantastic. And then one of the surprise MVP cards last night was Skullclaw Tryhard. This guy protected me surprisingly well against the Blue Eyes Tenpai deck because he turns everything to defense and is unaffected by defense position monsters. And because I made him using IP as material, he was indestructible. So this was a really, really hard monster to out for my opponent, because you can only really out him using spells and traps, which Tenpai doesn't really have. So absolutely fantastic card. And then next we have the Access Code Talker. I actually never made him last night. I just found a Byaku was a better mech all of the time. This guy just never came up for me. He's a fantastic card. He's great for killing. I just never used him. And then on some more cards I never used last night. Magistus Chorizo. He's just kind of in here because you can just kind of play some filler cards in this extra deck because you've got so much stuff that is really good. So he's in there because he's a tuner that you can summon. Dispatter and Chaos Angel. I do think these cards are good. I think these are definitely worth keeping in the extra deck. This is a banish and isn't too hard to make. Especially because Girsu, you can just use like Heartpour plus a Bestial. If you want to try and break your opponent's board instead of just making like Galatea or Girsu plus a Bestial, also makes Chaos Angel. Very nice. Just overall two great cards that didn't come up, but only because it's kind of hard to get tuners in this deck. Finally, I had Time Thief Reader in here because he's a dark who detaches for cost, so you could maybe make him using Girsu or Armageddon Knight or Heartpour and detach the harp for cost, banish him, he comes back in end phase, and you have Harp engraved to continue your combo. That's kind of the only reason I was playing him. That never came up. I never found myself wanting to make him. He was just kind of there. So that is the update on the Orcust deck list. I am really enjoying this deck. I think this is the deck I am probably going to be playing for a while because it just is. While it feels like in every single game you play, you can win, which isn't, which is really, really good for a deck that was made in like 2018 before the like power creep of Yu-Gi-Oh started in COVID, after COVID, during COVID, which so it's just such a fun deck, and I cannot wait for the new support to come out. So as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you on Wednesday for, well, I should see you on Wednesday for a new video. Thanks for watching. See yous.